Right. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, depending on where you are in your place. I'm streaming live from Scotland, and of course, Alagba Femi Odedeyi. You will be joining us today, all the way from the United States. Nigerian election is just coming on gradually. We are just about a month away, and that is starting from the 25th of next month. That is February 2023. Um, for the collection of the voters card was extended, just as we mentioned last week, till the end of this month. After that, there will no longer be any collection, and we just encourage people, and just the same way that Alagba Femi Odedeyi did mention last week, that people should go and get their PCV so that they can vote on the 25th. For those that did not register, unfortunately, that is the end of it. Now, today, we'll be talking still on the 2023 election, that is Nigeria election, and why we have some sections of the country, not a section of the country per se, but some groups, both in the Southwest and also in the Southeast, calling for the cancellation and that the election should not hold. And I'm talking particularly about the IPOB, the faction of the IPOB in the Southeast. And of course, in the Southwest, we have the Yoruba national people are saying that they don't want an election to take place in Nigeria. But remember, the Yoruba national agitators in the Southwest attempted through a court to stop the Ekiti and Osun election, but that was not successful. Over time, they've also been having some, they call it awareness, but some also call it protest, calling for a different nation, an independent Yoruba nation. And of course, we've mentioned severally, we've discussed on it severally on this program of the views and opinions of different people who believe that things does not happen. Things do not happen that way. But today we'll be coming up with something else, because in the course of the week, we had the Northern Elders Forum, their spokesperson, actually calling for the next president of Nigeria to call for, to set up another national conference. And we'll be talking to Alagba Femi Odedeyi from the Yoruba Referendum Committee on this, just to, get his views among other things. So please do welcome right on the program with me, Alagba Femi Odedeyi. You are most welcome on the program, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. And thank you for the program. And God will continue to bless you and enlarge the coast of your program so that the people might hear what we have to say and the message will be preached fully through us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alagba Femi Odedeyi. You were with us last week, and just as usual, we know things were going to happen. Yeah, especially as we are moving towards the next month election in Nigeria, we know virtually every day things will be happening right from that axis going out. And you have heard that the Nigerians Northern Elders Forum is actually calling for whoever is going to be the president after May. The election will be done in next month, but then the president will be sworn in May, hoping that everything goes on well. And they're calling for another national conference, and that's going to be the bulk of what we'll be discussing today, looking at what's your take on this, looking back at the conferences that we've had, and whether that is the solution to Nigeria's challenging problem at this time. But before we get into that, let's talk about next month's election. I asked you last week that what do you think? And you gave us some couple of things that could happen, including the election going on straight on. And of course, you did mention about people like Baba Afe Babalola, who called for an interim government, and also Pastor Chris Okotie, I think, that also called for an interim government. Of course, you did mention that because those government would not have any legitimacy, then they are open to a sort of a push, probably by the military, since it will be illegality versus illegality, illegitimacy versus illegitimacy. And of course, also, we don't think that an interim government will be able to tackle the current security issues that we have in Nigeria. But beyond that, it's the election is a month away.
Yeah.
Let's just put it in a way that yes, the election will go ahead. From your own assessment of the preparation of the preparation of the INEC,
Yeah.
do you think that INEC is ready for this election?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. They will claim to be ready for the election. There are two things going on at the same time. One is officially, statutorily, and legally, they must prepare for the election, and they must let people know that they are preparing for the election. They will let people know about the progress they are making and that they have made. That's why they will say, go and collect your PVC. We have this ready. We have this. We have this. So they will make sure people know about their preparations. At the same time, there may be some behind the scenes moves that because INEC or INEC and any of the government agencies and the government itself, they are not impartial actors in this process. Let's even assume, let's say, okay, APC is the party in power, and naturally, it will want to succeed itself, making sure it wins the election. But INEC is supposed to be an independent body. But so it is that independence that is the issue, because number one, it was INEC itself is a product of what is wrong with Nigeria. We have said that the 1999 Constitution is essentially what is wrong. I mean, it's the foundation of what is wrong with Nigeria. INEC was created by that Constitution, just like we had NADECO and FEDECO. Was it FEDECO?
Yeah, it was FEDECO.
FEDECO and yes, FEDECO. Sorry, I mixed it up with NADECO. FEDECO. And then it became INEC and all that. And it became INEC because the military regime, Babangida's military regime, wanted to make sure that they created that false impression. That's why they added the word I. It used to be NEC, National Electoral Commission. And then they introduced the word independent to make it appear as if it is independent of any partisanship. But once it is a product of that constitution, it cannot be independent. And then, of course, the members and all that are nominated by the president, and the National Assembly will ratify it and all that. So there will be behind the scenes moves, because every election in Nigeria and in other parts of the world are products of power struggles. They are not just, they are not supra power. They represent actual power struggles in Nigeria. So that is why most of the time, since independence, we had the three major parties: Action Group, NCNC, MPC, and then we had some minor parties like NEPU in the north, and UMBC, and some other parties. By the time of the Second Republic, we had 5 representing what I would call the 5 major blocks: Action Group in the West, MPP in the East, and GNPP in what is now known as the Northeast, NPN, of course, we know it's a Fulani group, and which one? I think there are 4, and PRP, which was between Kano and Kaduna states essentially, which was a transformation of the former NEPU, Aminu Kano's party. So by the time you now got to the the so-called Third Republic, we now had all these parties merged into 2, where you have the SDP and the NRC. You know what Babangida called a little to the left, and he defined what is to be to the left and what is to be to the right, with the same INEC conducting the election. But if you look at the results of the election, which we all refer to as June 12th today, you will discover that the major participants in that election were also representing ethno-national politics. You had Abiola, Nigerian Muslim and all that, who is, Yoruba. His running mate was Kingibe, a Kanuri from what we now call the Northeast. The NRC also had a Kanuri as his presidential candidate. That was Ibrahim Tufa, where he was Kanuri who grew up in Kano. So, by and large, at that time, the Hausa Fulani were not inside that circle. Yet we had an independent, INEC, Independent National Election Commission or something. We had an independent INEC. That INEC conducted that election when it was going along the line of a victory. Actually, it was actually shown that Abiola won the election. Then the subterranean power struggle took over. That was how the election was annulled by the military and everything that happened. So, but even at that time, INEC even stood up to his independence to a certain extent, because it didn't annul the election itself. It actually made it possible for the people to see where the election was going, where the election was headed. But it had no powers to ensure that its decision remained sacrosanct. So it fell victim, or it was part of the whole underlying power struggle. So the same thing happened, we know, after 1999. We know how the whole INEC also succumbed to the same pressures, even when Obasanjo declared that he was going to do a do or die election. And his very close friend, Jimmy Carter, came to Nigeria and saw the result, and the man said, this one beyond me. He ran away. Jimmy Carter ran away from Nigeria. I'm not going to be part of this crap. So that's why I said there are 2 dimensions to the INEC issue. That the public face is its independence and its preparations and so that people will have the confidence in voting, which is okay. Now, on the other side is that underlying issue where different forces will be competing for the control of INEC, or to ensure that things go in their own way. So the elections will hold, hopefully, without any. Now, the aftermath of the election will now show the level of independence, that is the next level of independence, just like it did in the June 12th era, that the INEC ensured that people knew the results. That was what fueled the agitation against military imposition. So at this time also, we can also see a similar trend where you have the Yoruba, the Igbo, and the Fulani competing against each other. Of course, everybody under the banner of Nigerian stuff. And then also remember that this time around also, there is no, except the, well, in the APC, it was almost the same thing. It's actually not almost the same thing like in 1993, where you have the Yoruba and the Kanuri competing. And in the PDP, you have Atiku openly not hiding his Fulani preference. And of course, Peter Obi in the Labour Party also flaunting his Igbo, although he's trying to cover it up with his religion. So you find all those. Now, INEC, as according to its public posture, is making preparations and continue to make preparations to make sure that the elections hold. When the elections, after the elections and the results are out, that is when the independent nature of INEC will manifest or disappear. Because if it stands by the results of the election, regardless of any protest, then we can say, yeah, it is independent. That is, the second condition has been resolved. But if it allows itself to be manipulated and all kinds of stuff like that, then that shows that it succumbed to the power struggle. So that's why I said the elections in Nigeria are essentially power struggle, a contest for power among or between the three major nationalities, not even three now, four or five major nationalities under the veneer of a Nigerian election. So every one of us have to be conscious of that fact and recognize it for what it is, that it is the aftermath. Because, some people, especially I think in the Labour Party, they are already saying that if their candidate does not win, it means the election is rigged. Even before the election, they are already saying it. So if people like that lose, then they will start all kinds of trouble. So that is when you will know whether INEC is independent or subservient to any other force. And of course, the rest of us, if we keep quiet, then, so that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Alagba Femi Odedeyi. And that is about INEC ahead of the 2023 election in Nigeria. And that's, like I said, it's just about a month away.
Yeah.
So, and we know that maybe a couple of weeks back, about 2 weeks back, INEC was citing insecurity, but I think they've played that down now. So there were also an unconfirmed report that INEC is intending this time around not to use university lecturers. Some people have said that maybe lecturers also, that they do work for parties behind. But then I think wherever they pick people, I'm not too sure that there's any particular section of the country where you can say that people are 100%, how do I put it, that they're just 100%
independent, non-partisan.
Non-partisan, yes, thank you very much. That they're not partisan, that they're not involved. So, but I think it's just about whether is there the possibility of having like a system that could checkmate this?
Yes, of course. That's why I will use the US as an example, because the US is the go-to country for most analysts in Nigeria. Before you start any discussion, they will say, but in the US, this is what happens. Now, the example I'm going to use is the January 6, 2021 insurrection on the US Congress.
Yes.
If we remember, when they went to attack the Congress to prevent Congress from certifying the election results, because each state has its own electoral board. The electoral board will certify the elections in their own states. They will now carry all the certifications from all the states to US Congress, and the US Congress will count it and then certify it. That is when a president is considered to be legitimately elected.
Right.
So when they stormed Congress on that day, their aim was to prevent Congress from certifying those results. And if Congress failed to certify it,
That's right.
the election will be deemed unconstitutional. And then they can do whatever they want to do. So the crucial point in that case is that the states certify their own elections.
Okay.
Each state. So after the elections, if they had and they have, they raised up all kinds of stuff in different states, and we want a recount, and it is a stolen election. It is this, it is that. Everything was resolved within the states.
The states. Yes.
Right. So for Nigeria, that is where the lesson comes from. We don't need a pan-Nigerian bureaucracy to conduct elections.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, by the way, that is what we are saying with the Yoruba Referendum Committee, that every constituent unit should determine their own electoral paradigms. So let's say in Yoruba, for example, Yoruba or Western region or West, for example, we have control over all election matters. And then there's a big issue. You won, you rigged, you put people behind my house. You put a dead body behind my house, so I couldn't, all kinds of stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
We will finalize it within ourselves, one way or the other. That finality is what we will take to the center, that this is our position. This is the position of the West on this matter. And just for stability, cooperation, peace, and justice, that center has no right to overturn what we have decided.
Right.
Whether good or bad, it will be left for us to suffer the consequence or enjoy the benefits of that decision. So that is why I said we don't need INEC at all. Because that, and like I said, it's a product of the 1999 Constitution, which has virtually centralized every decision-making process in Nigeria. So it becomes a tool to be wielded by anyone that is in control of the center or aspires to control the center or in the process of getting power in the center. But if it is decentralized, not even decentralization is a loose term. If the electoral decisions are rested within the constituent units, then you have no problem. And then the people who have no one to blame, like I said, we either suffer the consequences of our bad decisions or enjoy the benefits of our good decisions. At that point, it will not be somebody is trying to control us. Even if your candidate, if we say we have in the West, we are having elections, and the Dano and the Hadas and stuff, they are sponsoring candidates, and we allow them to take over. And we will suffer we won't be pointing accusing fingers at them. It will be our own. So that is the scenario, and that is what we should be aiming for. And yes, during the First Republic, that was virtually the same situation. That, like I keep saying, you don't need to go to the center. At that time, Lagos was the center to register your party to contest election in your hometown. All you need is to register it with your local agency, and you can be the only person in that party. That's your own problem. I mean, so you have, so that is the nature, that is the essence of self-determination. So, I mean, I think that's a short answer. I hope it's short answer.
Okay, so thank you very much, Alagba Femi Odedeyi. Yeah, I mean, that's the first part, and that's us talking about INEC's preparation, supposedly based on the information that is out there. And again, we just want to remind the people that you can still collect your PVC up till the end of this month. And even we encourage those people who are insisting that there will not be any election not to lose their democratic right and electoral power.
Yes.
You can have it in your hands, and when it gets to that time, you can decide whether to vote or not to vote.
Yeah.
But it is wisdom not to rob yourself of that electoral power that you have in your hand. And that's the first part completed, talking about the 2023 Nigeria election, which is coming up next month, and the preparation of INEC. The second segment, we will be talking about the call by the Northern Elders Forum for another national conference. But just before then, we'll go for a short break. And when we come back, we'll still be taking on Alagba Femi Odedeyi on his take regarding this call, especially looking at the history of conferences in Nigeria. Please do stay on with us. Welcome back, and thanks for staying on with us. Shortly before we went on the hard break, we had Alagba Femi Odedeyi talking about Nigeria's 2023 election, especially on the preparation of INEC. Again, be reminded, the PVC collection ends at the end of this month. So please do go and collect your own, whether the election is going to take place, as many people are saying, and whether it's not going to take place, as other many people are saying as well. On this next segment, we will be talking about the Northern Elders Forum's call for another national conference, with the purpose that Nigeria's issue will be resolved through this conference. I'm still right on with Alagba Femi Odedeyi. You are most welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
So, I mean, we're going to talk about this national conference. Well, before then, I want to bring this, I think, a practitioner from Nigeria that was interviewed by channels. And he did spoke about, in fact, he said the 2014 confab. You'll take us down history line when we get there. But he was talking about the 2014 confab, and he was talking that, I mean, this is a God-given document which we should be encouraged to activate. So we'll just hear him. It's 3 parts, but they are quite very short. And I will now take what you think about those and your view about that call for another national conference by the Northern Elders Forum. Okay, let's have it.
Well, Mr. George Ike joins us to weigh in on that matter. He's a legal practitioner. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
For that, for some, they think it came like a bolt from the blues, asking the executive to submit to them as a bill recommendations there so they can take a look at it. But for you, what's your impression of that?
Well, you see, we have to put it on the context. That demand is very timely, at least that request from the National Assembly, and I commend them for that. You see, it is timely in the sense that this country has never been so divided. There has never been this level of tension. Not even the 1966, 1967, crisis. It was division. What we are about to experience, or what we are trying to draw ourselves away from, is disintegration. That was the whole Nigeria against the Southeast, or precisely against the Igbos. That was the division. But what is happening now is disintegration, where literally every part of the country is asking for some level of self-determination or some level of autonomy, and asking that it is either we restructure the country or they go their separate ways. So it is most time, as a matter of fact, that is actually, is like God-given. That document of 2014 is God-given.
You know, that
but
also comes, okay.
But you see, the point here is that knowing that this country has never been this divided, I mean, except during, a few hours of Oka's coup, where he excised some part of this country where who he thought, he and his group thought were the oppressors and all of that, and it lasted for a few hours and he was overrun. There has never been a time that we got to this precipice, as it were. Good. So that makes it very imperative, if anything, that we should begin to reconsider, the structure of this country. And make no mistakes about it. A lot of people have argued that most of the people who are agitating for self-determination and all are young boys, youths, and all of that. What do they know about the war? Have they experienced any war? If you are waiting until the old men begin to bring out their working states to begin to agitate, in any case, all over the world, the people who do agitations are usually young people. And in any case, there is no difference between the age bracket of the people who we are trying to disregard or trivialize the agitation and those who put us into trouble in 1966. Gowon, Ojukwu, Danjuma, and all of that.
They were younger than the leaders.
As a matter of fact, they were UK. These youths we are talking about are even more enlightened than they are, because this is the technology age and all of that. And they not only put us into a war, they carried the war through. They were all between 25 and 30 and 35.
Well, the argument has been that this crop of youths,
seriously.
this crop of youths, the argument has been that this crop of youths have been quite docile over the time, and that we have not even gotten to that point to begin to think of disintegrating. How potent is that statement?
If you notice the acting president's speech, where he talked about the power of words and the power of the pen, what they are saying has gained so much traction. In short, part of what it is that when they tested their resolve, with regard to the sit-at-home strike or whatever, about last week or thereabout, you now find out that it is not just those boys that were being shot by the police, on the streets and all of that have gotten this spirit. In any case, the Biafran spirit itself is not just a geographical thing. It is a spirit of a fight for equity, fight for justice and all of it, which makes literally everybody that is either Igbo or not say, I'm a Biafran. It is like these are people seeking justice, equity, and all of that. Mm-hmm. So that is why I now contextualize this report as it were. And it is important for us to also look at the genesis of this report. If you notice, President Jonathan didn't want to do any any confirm in that regard. It was an agitation that essentially came from the opposition. So he saw it as an opposition.
Right, let me quickly stop him there. This was at the backdrop of the National Assembly calling on ex-president now, Jonathan that time, to send the report to the National Assembly so that they can pass a bill on it, bring it up as a bill so that they can sit and then pass it into law, and then it becomes a legitimate document. I know you've mentioned that word almost every time we'll bring you here about having something that is legitimate, not just something that somebody's done anywhere, whatever the position of that person is in the country, but that it's sort of giving a legitimacy to a document or an action, which makes it to become enforceable if the other party that are responsible to put it into action are not doing so. So this gentleman, as a legal practitioner, Judge Eke, was saying that it was timely for them to ask the president to send it in, and he also mentioned that you really wonder because he was saying that even as at that 2014, was that 2014 that the country was so divided. It's never ever been divided like that before. But when you look at where we are now to that 2014 was talking about, I mean, that means it was even better at that time to where we are today. Now, taking on the 2014 confab report, you still talk to us about the previous one that has been done. But looking at the 2014 confab report, would you consider it to be the best? I mean, not a perfect document to resolve Nigeria's problem, but would you consider it to be maybe the best of all the ones that have been done?
That would be a tough call to make in terms of what is best, because we have to define what best is before we can say, okay, this one is the best. So that means we have to not only compare, but we also have to contextualize. So it will be a tough one. So I won't want to use that word best. Again, one of the major participants in the conference, the late Sir Olaniyan Ajayi, who represented Afenifere, or one of the representatives of the Yoruba delegates at Afenifere at that point. After the conference, what he said publicly was that they went there to play. I'm quoting him verbatim. The way the Yoruba will say, so if one is going to take that as a correct interpretation of what happened, it's like saying the whole thing is a joke. The whole confab is a joke. Now, when I said in terms of defining it, in terms of comparison and contextualization, since you have said we will deal with the comparison later, historical antecedents, I can leave that and then contextualize it within the present, within the moment, the period it was organized. One of the major protagonists of that conference was one of the major participants in Gideon Oka's coup, Lieutenant Colonel, what's his name now? He's from Cross River. One of the major, he was a lieutenant colonel. I've forgotten his name now. He was part of the organizers, the secretariat of the national conference. He was also a major figure in Gideon Oka's coup. So after the coup, he went on to exile and then came back and then, okay. So during one of their zonal conferences in Osogbo, he came to Osogbo and then he said openly, and I'm quoting him verbatim, he said, no one organizes such a conference without his own agenda in mind. Here is an army officer, who is a senior army officer for that matter, or middle level, who participated in a coup. So one will assume that he knows what he's talking about, and a major confidant of the then president. So one will assume that he knew what he was talking about. So by saying that no one will organize such a conference without having an idea of what he wants to achieve with it, means that the entire purpose of that conference has a different agenda from what it is presented to us. So they presented it and then said they have their, whatever the agenda is, Colonel Sam, I will remember his name. So they presented, and it is further proven by the decisions made at the conference itself. The major decision facing Nigeria is on federalism. But according to that is, who are the federating units? Because you can't talk about a federal system without talking about the federating units. Otherwise, you are just putting your head in the sand. Who said that the major decisions concerning federating units and in Nigeria and all that will be taken at a later time. That was one of the major conclusions of that conference. So he said they will decide it at a later time. The whole question of even economic federalism, economic or fiscal, they call it fiscal federalism and all that, will be decided at a later conference. So the major indices of a federal state was, punted, to use a sports example, was shunted forward, that no decision was taken on it. But the various decisions that were taken, yes, states can merge, they can have state police, they can have this, they can have that. These things should be removed from the legislative list, that should be included and all that. They were all dependent on what federal state are we creating. Who are if you say state police, are the states the federating units? Clearly, no, they are not. But the military has said that, they carved up Nigeria into different states and then said, okay, you are the federating units. It is not possible. Why? Because we have people indigenous to their territories that if they want to have 10 states among themselves, that should be their business. And again, to use the American example, because they also run away to America to make their thing. American states that formed the first 13 colonies that created the American Confederacy before it became the Union were migrants from Europe who had already displaced all the native inhabitants of the land. So the colonies were created as colonies and they became the states, and then they became the federating units. Unlike in our own case, where the indigenous peoples still exist, but and then they are now replaced as states, not as peoples. That's why even at that conference, the Yoruba in Kwara and Kogi, we will come into that when we talk about the historical parallels. The Yoruba in Kogi were denied their request to be merged with their people the Ekiti people and I think Ila or some parts of Oyo people, that they speak the same language, culture, everything, but they were locked up in the north. And these people were demanding to be reunited with their king. And because they said they are not in the states. And they didn't choose to go to any other state themselves. So the fundamental question, that is where the context comes in. That when situated within that context, the question of best will be very difficult to determine because the context itself is fundamentally wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. So when we do the comparison with the rest, then we now maybe at that point, by the time we talk about it, yeah.
Okay. We'll take that comparison after this question.
Okay.
So now the Northern Elders Forum.
Inyam, Tony Inyam. That's the name of the colonel, Tony Inyam.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so we let's look at the call for another national conference by the Northern Elders Forum. Now, one thing we know, and which I believe also you've mentioned on this program, is that it seems that other parts of the country are actually presenting their demands to the presidential candidates. But it seems that on the part of the Yorubas, they are actually not engaging the political class to make a demand, even if that demand is going to be, we want, when you become the president, we want you to allow us to decide whether we want to have a Yoruba nation. They are not engaging with those presidential candidates at all, which obviously you have mentioned that is not wise. for us, because that means we are actually pushing ourselves out of things we should be dealing with. Because invariably, the politician that we're not engaging with, if eventually the person wins, we cannot hold the person to any agreement because we never had any with that individual. But away from that, the Northern Expert Forum has said the next president, whoever the person is going to be, that they want another national conference because they believe that this is where the issues of Nigeria could be trashed and there will be an agreement for the way forward. What's your take on this?
Well, it's very simple. I have said earlier that elections and the contest for power are power struggles among the major nationalities that make up the country. So we look at the Northern Elders Forum, essentially representing what one would call the, Hausa Fulani hegemony. Yeah, they have others who are not Hausa Fulani in their leadership, but that's what they represent. So you look at it from this angle. Atiku is representing the Fulani and is making a whole load show of it. So if he wins the election, if he wins the election, by their calling for a national conference, they have already prepared an escape route for him. Because if he wins the election as a Fulani in power, to make him fully acceptable to whoever is going to complain or agitate against it, because there will be agitations against it, then they will say, let us have a national conference to address these issues. So all those who are complaining will now start saying, okay, I want to go, I don't want to go. Like Jonathan did. He will now say, oh yeah, you governors, select people that will come. So where the agitations exist, they will just select some of them. Okay, don't worry, we'll go and discuss it there. So that's an escape route for them. If Obi wins, again, the same thing for them, because the vice president, though is Fulani, but he's there, and then the Igbo Fulani confrontation that has actually defined Nigeria's trajectory. That is the Igbo and Fulani cooperation and competition is what has defined Nigeria's trajectory since 1960. Will come into play. So that one also will now say, and the Obi is already saying, well, I'm going to serve Nigeria and blah, blah, blah. So come, let us, to douse the tension. And of course, if Tinubu wins for the Yoruba, you can expect a lot of agitation from especially the East, against him. And then if Tinubu agrees with them, they say, yeah, let's talk about this. So for them, it is like a way out, a plan B for them that, okay, when this thing happens, how do we contain any reaction? So the only thing that can contain it, according to them, is such a conference. That will do that. That is one. Two, like we said last week, those who are saying there should be no election, although the Northern Elders Forum is not saying there will be no election, but we can combine both, like Chief Afe Babalola, who is saying there should be no elections, and the Northern Elders Forum, who is saying there should be elections. So both of them, when combined, will be like, whether there is election or not, there should be a national conference. Again, it's a diversion. That for Chief Babalola, his reasons for calling for an interim government and all that, he stated his reasons, gels with the reasons the Northern Elders Forum gave. Because that means both of them agree that there is a fundamental problem that must be resolved. The only question is whether it should be resolved without this election or after the election. and they can always find a mutual way out. So if their candidates, if their preferred candidate does not win, if their preferred candidate does not win, the whole thing about national conference becomes matched with the question of interim government. And then, because, you know, they, of course, they are calling the shots because they are making all the so it is also a preparation for an inconclusive election. So if there is a crisis, they have the election, and there's a crisis and there's no obvious winner and everybody is running around in circles, then they will bring in the interim government anchored on calling a national conference that will now usher in a new constitution. So that is where both will merge. And we have seen it happen in Sudan, in Tunisia, or, you know, all the various Arab Springs that people were talking about, that at the end of the day, the military comes in, steps in, and then says, let us have a national this so that we can have an interim this so that we can have a new constitution. So that is the direction the Northern Elders Forum is going. So it's the same as those who are calling for no election, because both of them will benefit from an inconclusive election, their preferred candidate not winning the election, and if there is no crisis, they are able to contain the crisis, they will use the national conference to advance whatever agenda they have in mind.
Okay, let me quickly ask a question here.
Yes.
In terms of representation, if there's going to be a national conference, the representation will still be geopolitical, if I'm right. And which means if the North has more, I mean, as presently constituted, the North has more representatives than the rest, I mean, the southern part of the country. So even if there's going to be any conference or so, there will still be, because they want to be able to represent them.
Yes, that will be. That's why the dangerous notion of states as federating units, that's where it comes in. And that's why the question of the federating units is very crucial. That is the fundamental question that needs to be resolved. Who are the federating units? Is it the people or the geography? The people are the indigenous people in their different locales. The geography is the state. So if it is the people, let's even assume that the North has 300 million people, right? Just assumption. And the West, the Yoruba, have 10 million people. If the peoples are the federating units, the 300 million people in the North have no business in telling the 10 million people in the West what they want. That is the essence of the people being because your decision is yours to make.
That's it.
As long as your decision is yours to make, population figure does not matter. But once that decision is taken away from you and resided in something else, that something else will now determine your decisions. So now we now have states, like you said, they have 19 states.
Most states right from the north.
So by the time they combine everything, just like it happened in that 2014 conference also.
Yes, sure. Yes.
Yeah. And that is what is happening in the National Assembly that we have today.
Right now.
So where you have a combination that is already embedded in superior numerical numbers. So even when you have a national conference, it is the agenda that they propose that will now become the issue. So that is why it is crucial to make that distinction and to understand it and to approach it from that perspective, that the right to determine our aspirations and expectations rests with us.
Yes, that is to rest with the people. I want you to Yes, I want you to, before you go on with that, I want you to, I know you mentioned it some few minutes ago, but in case if some people miss this, you were talking about people always referring to America when they are talking about Nigeria's democracy. And you did mention that when we look at America with its state structure, the indigenous people were obviously sacked, so to say, by these migrants. So it was easier for them to have a state. But it's not the same thing with what we have in Nigeria. Although we have states in Nigeria, but the unique identity of Nigeria is that it has multi or ethnic nationalities, which are clearly identified by their boundaries, by their language, and by their culture. So, for instance, we have the Yoruba, we have the Igbo, we have the Hausa, we have the Fulani, we have the Kanuri, we have the Aworis, we have the
Effiks and everything. Yes.
So when we're comparing, and these are for our viewers, when we're comparing Nigerian democracy and America's democracy, they are not the same.
No.
Because of the state structure.
Yeah.
The US can decide by states because there's no indigenous, it's not that they are not indigenous people still in America, but they do not have that regionalized geography. Whereas in Nigeria, and we can see it in what we have now, where the tribes are throwing up presidential candidates. You have the one that is Yoruba for APC, one that is Hausa Fulani for PDP, although some Hausa people are saying, look, don't call us Hausa Fulani, just separate it. And of course, from the Igbo, from the eastern side, we have Peter Obi. So it's just that analysis that I want us to clarify, because people kept on making this comparison between Nigeria and the United States. Just as we've mentioned, in any state controlled representation system, the North will always have, in terms of numerical strength, they will always have more than the rest of the country. Because as the country is now, we have more states and more local governments in the North than the rest part of the country. So if we're going to do anything that has representation, there will definitely be more people coming from the North. And if it comes to a vote or a decision, then that means they have a greater numerical strength than the rest of us. And that brings us to your position about the solution, the probable solution to Nigeria's problem by us focusing on the nationalities as the federating unit. But some people are saying that it's ethnic bigotry, we should be one. What's your answer to that?
Well, it's very simple. I mean, one, from a historical perspective, when Chief Awolowo made the famous statement that Nigeria is a mere geographical expression, it's not a nation, he was vilified, he was called a tribalist, he was called all sorts of names. Now, let us start from there. Those who are calling Awolowo names, and let's start mentioning some names now. Azikiwe, and Nnamdi Azikiwe was in the forefront of denouncing Awolowo at that time, 1945. That was when the book was published. Before 1945, that was colonial Nigeria, we had several ethnic associations. Let me put it down, or what they would call tribal associations. we have the Igbo State Union.
Right.
We have the Ibibio State Union. But there was no Yoruba State Union at that time. It was only in 1945 that Egbe Omoduduwa was founded. So the question is this: if you have your own state union that had been existing since Igbo State Union was founded in 1936, its name was changed to Igbo Federal Union in 1944.
Right.
So you have all these things existing since about 1936. And then somebody came up and founded his own union in 1945. And then you started calling that person a tribalist. So you can see, that why I mentioned that is to show the deficiency in definition, which unfortunately most people, especially the young people of today, have been carried away to think that you can have a nation out of nothing. It is not possible. It is never done. Again, let us go back to America that we always point to. The Native Americans were wiped out and destroyed. Some of them, they now created what they call reservations for them. And then they have a bureaucracy, Bureau of Indian Affairs, that will be taking care of their issues. And even they give them some level of sovereignty. They can have their passport, like the Yoruba nation that they are talking about, that they can use, and identification and all that. But they were essentially wiped out from their land. And those who wiped them out became Americans that we know today. So the American nation itself was not some kind of dream that came to fruition. It was purely an act of war. So if in Nigeria you are now saying it is bigotry to advocate for your own people, or it is tribalism. Actually, Azikiwe used two words at that time, balkanization and Pakistanization, that they will oppose it, they will destroy this, all sorts of things. So if you want to create a Nigeria by destroying the indigenous people, whoever succeeds in making that destruction possible will become the Nigerian. And if we now, let's take the Yoruba, for example, so if we say, okay, we don't want to be tribalists, we want to be Nigerian, and therefore, those who are interested in taking over our land, openly saying it in 1949, when they had this constitutional conference, the Eastern Regional Assembly voted on a proposal to claim that Lagos is no man's land. So if the Igbo in 2023 are saying Lagos is no man's land, the reference was to that 1949 declaration that they had made. So now, okay, because we don't want to be tribalists, Igbo can come and rule us, as governor or as this or as that. What it means is that you have simply wiped yourself out of the map, because the agenda is there to take over your land. They will take it over, and then you become nobody. Of course, you can become something by becoming an Igbo in the process. Now, I'm not saying there's nothing bad in becoming Igbo. I mean, anybody can be anybody.
At least it should be by choice.
So that is the reality on ground that quite a lot of us don't want to face. And then when you start analyzing it for them, they will say, you are a bigot, you are a tribalist, we are this, we are that, which we are talking about the Northern Elders Forum the other time. We are saying, and it has happened over and over, how they manipulate the whole process to become dominant. If these things are written, they are available. So if they are working towards their own self-determination, let me put it that way, because they want to control, what stops me from doing similarly for my own people? When Egbe Omoduduwa was going to be founded in 1945 in London, Awolowo called Azikiwe. It was formed after the collapse of the Nigerian youth movement. Said, look, let us work together, and this. They refused to turn up. So these things are recorded. They are available to anyone who wants to research and get it. So these are not, it's not a question of bigotry to say the truth about history. It's like saying in America, the Native Americans were wiped out, and then they accuse you of being a bigot. Does that make any sense?
Not at all.
Because it's the truth. So you can. So these are fundamentals. Now, in the whole question of power struggle and power equation and all that, how come the North became dominant? It's also recorded. How how even initially earlier on I said the problem with Nigeria is the competition and the collaboration between the East and the North. Why the Yoruba in Kwara and Kogi remain in the North today was because the East supported the North against a plebiscite in Ilorin and Kaba. It's recorded. It's recorded. So because the British, even though we know the British wanted the North to rule for whatever reason, which is not relevant to what we are saying now, the people in Kwara, in Kaba and the Ilorin provinces had the option of voting whether they want to be part of the West or part of the North. Now, the option was predicated on the acquiescence, that is, the regional government and the federal government agreeing and all that. But the East and the North collaborated to ensure that the plebiscite does not take place. That's how Ilorin and Kaba became part of the North today and remain so. The question of Lagos, the same collaboration existed, where they wanted Lagos to be excised from the West. But for the spirited efforts put up by the action group delegation and all that, they were only able to get what they call the Lagos colony, the Lagos Island, as the federal capital. They call it the federal capital, and the rest part of Western region. So, and then of course, when they collaborate, they also fight. And the fighting has been going on since who knows when, and it culminated in 1966, and the rest is history. Now, so when we take all that into consideration, that's why we keep saying that the whole question of the federating unit is the core issue that must be faced in Nigeria. Because when you ignore that and you start talking about Nigeria, then it means you are just building a castle in the air. And that is why all these crises happen. So that, was it before Jonathan or shortly after Jonathan? What were we seeing? Movement for the emancipation of Niger Delta.
Yes.
Niger Delta Development Revolutionary Forces, all kinds of forces, which they now call militants or ex-militants, Tompolo, Asari Dokubo, all the rest of them. What were they fighting for? They were talking about emancipating the Ijaw nationality. Right. Before them, you had Saruwiwa and the Ogoni. And what is happening to the Ogoni in present, I think, in Rivers State now and stuff like that? They were pushed into Rivers State to, I think, Rivers or whichever state. Without any regard for them as Ogoni people. Right. So when he left power, everything changed, and then you have the Boko Haram who are saying they are Kanuri and they are this and they are that. They started fighting all that, and then you have the Hada, the Dano and Dano now who are saying yes, we are Fulani, we have the right to go anywhere, to go and eat up any crop. So these things are there. So the only way you can melt, when they say America is a melting pot, it's a melting pot because all those European people that came had the same agenda against the indigenous people. That's why they were able to melt. And then, so if you want a Nigeria as a melting pot, somebody has to pay the price. Somebody has to pay the price. So the question is, who is going to pay the price? That is why the fight always happens and then manifests during elections, and everybody goes back to their nationalities because nobody wants to be to pay the price to be melted into anything else. So rather than continuous fighting, why don't we recognize it as it was recognized even by the British that initially attempted to melt the whole thing up? So eventually, the whole question of federalism became the topical and the dominant issue in Nigeria's independence. And so when they started that, then the Easterners say we are pure Nigerians because we live. Are they the only people that live outside their environment?
Not at all.
So you have other people that are living somewhere else outside their localities. They are not making the same claim. So when you now attribute so-called nationalism to yourself, you are already saying that the others don't matter. And that is their own way of showcasing it. For the Fulani now, they say, yeah, we have Danfodio, we have this, we want to create an empire and this and that, and Britain supported us and do that, and they are doing what they are doing. And for the Yoruba, we are saying, wow, don't bring that to us. Even though there is a lot of confusion among us, but we are not going to be your guinea pigs now.
Definitely.
So that should be recognized.
Okay.
So once that is sorry to be.
No, sorry. I want to, because the point where you are was that this has to be recognized that the people should be the federating units.
Yes.
And not just states.
Yes.
And I want to ask, we've mentioned about us in Nigeria, but comparing Nigerian democracy with America, whereas the Britain or the British is a ex-colonial master.
Yes.
And we see that some of those who pushed for the independence of Nigeria from British, they actually came to study in the UK.
Yes.
And currently, the system of government in the UK recognizes the people. So we have the Scottish people, we have the Welsh, we have the English, and we have the Irish, the Northern Ireland that are part of here. They have their own assemblies, they have their own powers as a people. Why is it that we are quick to compare our democracy with America and not with Britain, which is, similar to the situation we have in Nigeria?
That is part of what I would call the 419, the 419 of politics. You see, when they introduced the American concept, Nigeria was practicing the parliamentary system essentially along Britain, and then we had the regional governments, that federalism, Western, Eastern, all the region and all this stuff. So the independence was a tacit acknowledgement of the nationalities by and large, though represented by, you had different political parties, even in Yoruba land. Had the Action Group, Ibadan People's Party, Undo Improvement Union, NCNC, and all the rest of them. So it sort of reflected the recognition of the peoples as the federating units in Nigeria. Yeah. But immediately the military came in, especially when the Obasanjo regime came in, because they said their excuse was that it was the parliamentary system that created the problem, and in their, then they now said, we are going to cancel everything, we are going to do everything, and then reinvent Nigeria along state lines. So they started calling themselves a federation of states, as it were. And then the whole thing continued from then on until where we find ourselves today. So I will place the blame on our political leadership, political and intellectual leadership. Well, I will even place more blame on our intellectual and academic leadership for not addressing this question with our political leaders. And the political leaders, it's fair weather. Whatever exists to fight the power game, they will jump into it. Right. That was why in 1999, when they were going to do the transition, a lot of Yoruba were demanding that we must negotiate a constitution before handing over at that time. But, our leaders at that time, no problem. They have surrendered. Nigeria has surrendered. We will get the presidency. We'll do that. Then they just went into it without any backup plan. And what the military simply did was to impose one of them. Okay, say you want the president, we'll give it to you. Okay, here's our man. And they put Obasanjo there. And that is what is happening. So these are realities that must be faced by our intellectual and academic communities. And the fear, most of them, even though they know, but for fear of being accused of being bigotry, this and that, they will not ignore reality and start chasing shadows. And that is what is happening. They are chasing shadows because the problem is not going to go away until one nationality or a combination of nationalities descend on the rest of us and turn Nigeria into what they want. Whether that will be possible or not, that is. But the reality is that our academicians, our intellectuals, especially what they call the public intellectuals, those who try to integrate their academic training with political discourse in the public sphere, that they can start addressing these issues, so that and then it's not that what we are saying is from the moon. Take Switzerland.
Yeah.
Switzerland is a federation, and they have 4 major languages in Switzerland. All the 4 major languages are represented. Each one has its own regional, what they call cantons.
Canton, yes.
Different areas. So that is Europe. Not to talk of the Britain that you have mentioned.
Britain, yes.
You have all these nationalities that recognize themselves as nationalities, even though they still adhere to the citizenship of Britain.
Of the Britain, yes.
But they still recognize themselves as Welsh, as Scots, as Irish, as English. Even for a long time, we always think that everyone in the Great Britain is English. For a long time when we were young, everyone from there is English. Many of the governors in colonial Nigeria were Scots. They were Scottish people that were serving British colonial interests. So they recognize it. So if the Oyibo people can recognize it among themselves, what is the problem with us?
That's right, yeah.
So that is the question for our intellectuals, for our academics, and for our politicians to answer. And that is what we try to provide an answer to through our advocacy that the solution to Nigeria is by referendum by nationalities, for them to decide what they want for themselves, under which we can now negotiate with each other as to how we want to move forward.
Yeah, rather than calling a national conference where the
where
president will select people around and
then they will start talking, and then they will start fighting. You know, when they get to the conference, you know, the 2014 conference, they fought, they almost jettisoned the whole thing.
Was it the emir of Zungeru or so that said they will walk out of Nigeria and then they will
the place and all that? So they will fight, they will now say, okay, let's solve this problem. Then they will solve the problem, leaving the problem alive.
That is it. So let's now zero into what we were when the nationality, so to say, were recognized.
Yeah.
What exactly is wrong with the 1963 Constitution?
Well, the 1963 Constitution was just an amendment of the Independence Constitution. So by 1963, now in the Independence Constitution, each region had its own court of appeal. Okay. We had no Nigerian Supreme Court, for example, at that time. Then each region was able to determine. And then we had the Governor General as the representative of the Queen. So, but because, again, just on the surface, the government that came to power at independence was a coalition between the North and the East, the MPC and the NCNC. The major demand of the action group at that time was for all regions or nationalities to become regions or states of them by themselves. That was their major demand, that they should have autonomy, self-determination. You know, self-determination is not a new subject that the Yoruba nation people are trying to make it out to be. Since the colonial era and independence at the House of Representatives, the action group actually placed a motion for the creation of more regions or states on the basis of self-determination of the various nationalities, which was defeated surreptitiously by that alliance. So that was the alliance that got us to independence with the 1960 Constitution and all that. So because they wanted to truncate and disempower the action group, both of them combined to ensure that only in the Midwest will the referendum take place to create the Midwest region. Right. And there will be no referendums in other nationalities across Nigeria, especially in the East and the North. So in order for them to do that, they had to change the 1960 Constitution to make it a Republican Constitution, that is, take it away from British, from the Queen. Right. Because the Governor General represented the Queen at that time. And they had what they call the Privy Council, which is like sitting in London that can also determine, give judicial determination to whatever happens in the colonies. Yes. So, and they know, because that was what the action group did during the negotiations for independence. They argued successfully for the minorities, which, when they set up what they call the Willings Commission at that time, made this own recommendation. So that if the Privy Council still exists and British colonial rule still exists, it is possible for the action group to campaign for more regions under the 1960 Constitution. So they had to change that constitution by removing Nigeria from British colonial rule. So they changed the name of the Governor General to President. You know, they used to say that Azikiwe was a ceremonial president. So they changed the name to President. And then they created a Supreme Court for Nigeria, which did not exist before. Then they now inserted a provision. Like I said, all their aim since independence was to destroy the action group, the West. And then when the crisis in the action group started, and then even the motion for Midwest referendum was supposed to be passed by the Western Region House of Assembly. But they didn't allow the Western Region Assembly to pass it. They passed it at the Federal House of Representatives, which was unconstitutional. So to back it up, they now inserted a requirement in the 1963 Constitution to say that the central government at that time has a right to remove the governor of a region. So that, because of course we know the region they are talking about, the crisis in the Western region, they wanted to remove Adesoji Aderemi as governor, and then they can also remove the premier. Some of us who are old enough or who have heard the story will recall this newspaper headline, Akintola Taku. Because when the Western Region legislature removed him, he refused to leave office. That is the meaning of Akintola Taku. And then, of course, the 1993 Constitution was able to install an administrator. They declared a state of emergency and installed an administrator to run the show. So what is basically wrong with the 1963 Constitution are those examples. Not that it satisfied the yearnings of the various nationalities, but more importantly, there was the obnoxious requirement that they can remove the premier and the governor of a region. They instituted the Supreme Court, so everything that you used to determine within the appeal court in your region now goes to the Supreme Court, and all kind. So that was the beginning of centralization, which was only acted upon, seized upon when the military seized power, and which we have been working today. So to even say that we should go back to that constitution with amendments, changes and stuff, is still not addressing the problem. Because one, we don't need to go back to it. It's no more relevant. The question is this: what is relevant for Nigeria and for most of Africa is what we call second decolonization. That is, the first colonization that brought independence in 1960 gave us that regional system. Why? Because it was essentially based on the various nationalities represented by their political parties. So what we are saying now is a second decolonization, that the nationalities that were denied representation the first time should be given that right now. So it is not by going back to 1963 that we give them that right. It is by coming out with a new constitution that all the nationalities will be able to determine for themselves what they want. Even if they don't want to be part of us, let them go anywhere they want to go. Nobody's going to fight anybody. They will come in as visitors, we will issue them visas, and we can deny them visas also. Anyway, that's just a joke.
Right.
So that's the essence of it, that it goes beyond going back. As attractive as the regional system was, it's not just going back to it or using it as a template and this and that and that and that. But people, when we say self-determination, it simply means your ability to state how you want to live your life.
Definitely.
So that is the difference. And before I go, I want to reference that George Eke that you played, when he said the National Assembly said that Jonathan should bring the thing as a bill.
To bring it in as a bill so that they can discuss it.
There has been a bill that was submitted by Rotimi Williams and Nwabweze to the National Assembly, even before that time. So all these things we are just skirting around the surface. Why? Because somehow there is an emerging consensus to deny the indigeneity or the nationality of the peoples in Nigeria.
Nigeria.
And that is the basic problem.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alagba Femi Odedeyi. I mean, we're just rounding up now.
Yes.
And I want us to look at those conferences that has been done. We got lots of conferences. We have the Obasanjo one. We have the is it Willings?
Willings.
Commission. Yes, we have that. In fact, APC also had something towards the restructuring of the country and co. Now, looking at all these documents, what's missing? I mean, maybe there's something that is core that is missing in all these documents. That is the first question. The second question is, I believe that the Northern Elders, they are aware that there are the 2014 confab. I think the North obviously supported Buhari when, I mean, Northern Elders, they supported Buhari when he came on. So they are aware of the El-Rufai's report on restructuring of the country. And I'm sure they are holding off to also know about the Willings Commission report and co. So the first question is, what's missing from all these documents? And the second one is that those that are calling for another national conference, why are they not calling for any of those previous documents to be implemented, even if there's going to be some amendments?
Well, like I said, let me start from the second before going to the first. The call for a national conference and all that is one, a diversion, two, a preparation for a desired outcome, which may or may not be favorable. If the outcome is favorable to them, they will use the national conference as a diversion to placate whoever wants to complain. If it is not favorable to them, it becomes another line of action for them to take. So that is the basic thing. Now, to connect with the first question, there's one, aside from the fundamental nature of what is wrong with the conferences, especially under the military, as to the question of nationality. I mean, there's nothing that they haven't missed anything. I mean, it hasn't solved anything. So, and if all those conferences did not resolve any problem, definitely calling for another conference will not resolve the problem unless a paradigm shift takes place. In other words, we have been having conferences since who knows when. Even under SAP, we had some kind of conference, the Structural Adjustment Program, and all that. One, none of them saw the light of the day. As the elders also admitted, though, that they were filed away somewhere, but they did not ask the question, why was it filed away? Why were these things filed away? That is the first question. Two, there's nothing a new conference is going to add to what has been discussed or debated. The only thing a new conference will do that will be positive is to change the paradigm of the conference itself. In other words, we have said it, the previous conferences, the president, the governors will select some people to represent whoever, whatever they want to represent, professional bodies and everybody. Then they will go there and start yapping and all that. And then they will file it away, as the Northern Elders said. But the paradigm shift will be, if there's going to be a conference, then let the component, the constituent, the federating units in Nigeria send their own representatives by themselves.
Right.
And the only way they can send their own representatives is when they have agreed among themselves, one way or the other, what they want and what they expect from such a union. That is where we say the Yoruba, for the Yoruba people, where the Yoruba referendum comes in. So if the agitation is for such a conference, it's no longer a national conference, but it becomes a conference of nationalities, which will be similar to the pre-independence regional conferences, constitutional conferences they had at that time. Because at that time, in pre-independence, the action group had its own well laid out positions, arising from its activities pre-colonial, through the elections, the parliamentary elections, through the time Awolowo was the leader of government business in Western region and all that, which now allowed them to represent the Western region at the Constitutional Conference. All the other parties also did similarly. So if we are going to have any conference in the future, it should be based on what the federating units want, their aspirations, their expectations. And of course, before they want anything, you must be recognized as existing. Because if you don't exist, you can't represent. So if there's going to be a conference between the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Kanuri, the Ijaw, the Efik, the Ogoni, everybody. Everybody will have decided within themselves, okay, what do we want? Where do we go from here? That is the position that now it's not a position that will be negotiated upon.
Right.
What will become the basis for such a national conference will now be the means of relating with each other. Okay, you are Ogoni, I am Yoruba, you are Igbo. We want to create a country. How does it go? Okay, because we are both internal nationalities indigenous to Nigeria, we are also external people. Like the Yoruba are spread across at least 4 West African countries. The Fulani are spread across West Africa. So naturally, I'm just using that as an example. A Yoruba will think beyond Nigeria.
Sure.
So when we sit down with either the Ogoni or the Fulani, we are not just saying Nigeria alone. We are talking about Yoruba. So it will affect the kind of foreign policy that Nigeria will have. What kind of foreign policy are we going to have? Do we, for example, the Yoruba, allow any person in Benin Republic or Brazil that claims to be Yoruba, or anybody who claims to be Yoruba by religion, all these Ifa practitioners and all that, we will say, okay, they are this side. We will give them Yoruba citizenship or residency automatically because they are Yoruba.
Yeah.
That is a question. And again, these citizens are not. When the Western region existed, they built the Yoruba house in Bahia, in Brazil, with the aim of relating with the Yoruba because they are the largest cultural group in Brazil at that time. And then they instituted Portuguese as the first foreign language at the University of Ife, so that the Yoruba can learn Portuguese that the Yoruba in Portugal are speaking. And the Yoruba in Portugal will also be able to connect with their Yoruba at home. So it will inform on foreign policy. That means we have a Nigeria whose foreign policy will be flexible. In fact, it will become the basis for a new non-aligned country in the world, because at that point, we will not say we are for this, we are against that, we are for this, we are against that. Our internationalism will define and it will be beneficial to other nationalities also, who also have the same thing. So at the end of the day, you have a Nigeria that has an impact on the international community because it is not constrained within a nation-state paradigm. So it will become a multinational and international state, which will be a novel idea in world politics. At least we will say that we have something we have contributed to world history.
Yes.
So this is so when we have such a conference, it's not going to be to if the Yoruba decide among ourselves through the the process will have consolidated everything. We want to use Yoruba language as a language of instruction in our schools.
Yes.
We are not going to go to a national conference to go and negotiate and say, look, but everybody don't speak Yoruba now. We should use English. Well, no. We can use English because we have been using English, but Yoruba is our. And anyone who doesn't speak Yoruba from outside Yoruba land that wants to go to school in Yoruba land, then we have to learn the language. After all, Nigerians go to Finland, Sweden, China.
Yes, and the man.
And then they learn their language to become. So what is stopping them from learning any other language? Again, I'm just using Yoruba land as an example.
Yeah, the others can also
Domesticate it among their team. And if the Ogoni say they want to use their language for their schools, but they are not as big as the Yoruba or the Igbo, no problem now. Use your language to the best of your ability. Maybe from primary school to secondary school, or maybe some other level. And then if they want to go beyond that, then they can go to anywhere they want to go to, learn their language, and then do whatever they want to do. So these things are practicable. And so when we say there must be a paradigm shift, it is not just a question of a new president now using his power, because that is what it will amount to, and influence to select people. And then as the governor of a state, bring your representatives, and then people will start jostling with the governor. Send me now. The governor will say, okay, if I send you, what are you going to bring to me? All kinds of stuff like that. So that will so we have to go beyond that and then say, okay, you Yoruba people, like Governor Akeredolu has been saying, it is well with him. He will get well from his sickness. Where did we decide? So we decide. And fortunately, what we are going to decide upon has been codified. Now there may be issues to debate, but that will be among ourselves. But we have codified it. Let us be under one regional government. If we want to have 20 states in Yoruba land, that will be our business.
That decision. Yeah.
It's nobody's. So once we tackle that internal, then when we go to any conference, it is that referendum that will legitimize and empower us to negotiate on behalf of Yoruba people, just like other nationalities would be so empowered. Because at that point, when you go to a conference with a mandate from your people, there are certain things that cannot be negotiated. You only go with what is to be negotiated. And that's why we said for the federal council, each one will send his own representative. Nobody will be running around Nigeria to campaign for Nigeria's presidency. You only need to campaign in your area, your territory. And if the Yoruba produce one, if we say send one candidate to the national executive, the Yoruba will send one. The Ogoni, smaller than Yoruba, will send one. Whoever is between, everybody will send one. So if they say we have 300 people, 300 languages and blah, 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 okay, 300 people will be there. One from each locality. Now, if you now want to select a head of state or president or whatever name we choose to call it, it is only among those 300 people that
election will be
elected. Now, let's say there is one person there who can buy the entire people out. Fine. Let him buy them out. Let him or her buy them out and become president.
Become the president.
The beauty of it is that he only becomes the president of what is decided there. He's still our president though, because we are still in Nigeria, but the essence of being part of that union remains within Yoruba land. So even if he or she buys everybody out, it's not going to come buy one out. They will be enjoying themselves, but it will not
To
negatively
not affect
affect
the regions.
what we are doing in our. Now we can tell our candidate about send the lobby, why did you allow yourself to be rubbish like that? Don't you have money to buy him out? Then we can be, all kinds of stuff like that. But the essence of it is that we have created that avenue for ourselves. And we are not saying nobody, I mean, even in the Western region, when they started the education program, people came from other regions now to come and attend schools in the Western region, and they were not turned back. And the Yoruba even we have this thing, maybe it is now affecting us negatively, but we have this thing that we welcome strangers. So there's no fear of anybody being turned away from living to the fullest of his or her capacity in Yoruba land. Just like Yoruba also will not be denied, but the essence of the whole thing will be there. So if such a conference is not along those lines, if it is just along the usual stuff, then it is not worth it. But it is not enough to say it is not worth it or to condemn them. They have set an agenda. Just like Chief Afe Babalola set an agenda, and Okuti and all the rest of them. So the agenda is interim government, no election. National conference after election. So, but we are now saying, okay, fine. Our own agenda is election or no election. It is referendum.
We just want a referendum for the people.
Because nationality referendum, because it will address both questions simultaneously. And more importantly, it gives it the legitimacy. That's it. So if there's going to be an election and the president emerges and he wants to do a conference, all the president needs to do is to support the push for nationality referendum. That we are not saying you shouldn't do it, just go and do it and give us the result. Now they can campaign against what the people want to, but that's the people to decide. So that will be the limited role. Now, if there's no election and there's going to be an interim government, because it is an illegitimacy, regardless of the reasons, that means, yes, there should be no power vacuum. So because there is no power vacuum, you want to install an interim government. Fine. If you install an interim government, we, the people, the nationality, so this is what we want to, this referendum, we want to conduct it so that it becomes our. So the interim government itself already has something placed before it. So that's why I said, whether it's interim government or whether it's an election, the nationality referendum is the solution to all this. And if we insist on it right from now, and we push it like we have been pushing it, we will not be caught flat-footed when the time comes. Because if there's going to be an interim government, we have already decided it is the referendum, so we are not going to join anything. And if the president is sworn in and starts messing around, this is what we want. It's already there on the table. So that is the.
Thank you very much, Alagba Femi Odedeyi. Alagba Femi Odedeyi is from the Yoruba Referendum Committee. You can always reach him either through us, by putting your comments on this session, or by sending an email to yorubaref@gmail.com. Our own email is oymediascotland@outlook.com. Thank you so much. We'll be coming back next week. But remember, there are some couple of points that we brought out today. Number one, remember to collect your PVC if you've registered. You need to keep it. Whatever happens, you don't want to lose that democratic right and that electoral power. Secondly, very importantly, we spoke about the unique identity of Nigeria, that the people quite different and in contrast to what is happening in the United States. We are much more aligned to what is happening in the United Kingdom, where you have the peoples, the nationalities, that is the Scottish, the English, the Welsh, and the Irish. That's what we have in Nigeria, and that is why Yoruba referendum is pushing for a system where the people decides, or the people are the federating units and not just the states, which are brought in by the military in 1966 after the coup, and they've sustained that up until now. Thirdly, the Yoruba Referendum Committee has a petition that is right on chain.org. If you type in on Google Yoruba Referendum Petition, that is to support the call on the 6 Southwest State Houses of Assembly, that is in Lagos, Osun, Ondo, Oyo, Ekiti, to pass the bill. There's a bill before the House. The bill for Yoruba referendum is before the House. It's been before the House since last year, and for them to pass it into law, so that whatever happens, whether there's an election or not, whether there's an interim government or not, whether there is even a military coup or not, we already have a demand to place before whichever government comes on. Even if there is chaos at the end of the day and the international community steps in, we would have something to put before them as the demand by the Yoruba people. But we've not got beyond that. The Yoruba Referendum Committee is also encouraging other nationalities. I mean, everybody will agree that Yoruba has never gone to other communities to take over their land or to claim that they hold the land together. I've never had in history that Yoruba have gone to the north to go and claim land in the north, or they've gone to the east to go and claim land in the east. So Yoruba Referendum Committee is saying that the same template that the Yoruba Referendum Committee has placed before the 6 Southwest States Houses of Assembly, that they could domesticate it, they could use it as a template and place it also before their own Houses of Assembly. If indeed we are all truthful and genuine about a Nigeria that is restructured in a way that each people are allowed to move at their own pace. If Yoruba is not looking at a restructuring that will put the Igbo and the Fulani and the Gwari under it, or the Igbos are not looking at a restructuring that will put the Yoruba, the Fulani, and of course the Fulani not also looking at a restructuring that will put Yoruba and Igbo under them, Yoruba Referendum Committee is saying that this is the approach that we all should take by impressing on our representatives in our region to have a people's referendum. That is a nationalities referendum where the people themselves will decide what they want and how they want to have relationship with other nationalities in Nigeria. Again, we are back here next week, God willing. And once again, thank you, Alagba Femi Odedeyi, and we'll be catching up with you next week.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And of course, as we usually say, something will happen. Something will happen that will also, we didn't expect the Northern Elders Forum to say what they said.
Yes.
But, so things are happening. So thank you for watching, for listening, and thank you for having us on this program.
Thank you very much. Right, until next week, I remain yours. My name is Oludare Jerokun. God bless.